Yes, everyone, you know what time it is. It's your boy Jack here at the Irish Hotspur, and I'm going to be discussing here what Spurs actually need this January in order to keep pushing and challenging for those top places around the Premier League table. Logically, with Kane gone and with Richarlison still leaving a lot to be desired, I can see why many fans around the Premier League, as well as many Spurs fans, of course, would think that we should be looking at another striker or another goal scorer in general this January. But I do have to disagree, actually, with that line of logic, and I'm going to tell you why. So everybody in those comments down below, do let me know what you think we need actually this January. Smash that like button for me. I'm going to get detailing as to why I think actually we don't need another goal scorer this January. Now, my first point I'm going to make here as to why we don't probably need another goal scorer this January, or at least this season, is that Sonny originally probably was your top scorer prediction, right? He was somebody that we expected to sort of carry the burden, be able to grab most of the goals in the Premier League this season. And so far, he's been able to do that. He's second in the league when it comes to most goals scored, just behind, I believe, in Erling Haaland. And it's so far that seems to be kind of his best position right now, at least in that sort of striker's role. So if you were to bring in, or at least thinking that we should bring in another striker, you might end up sort of pushing Sonny out of what has been maybe his best position so far this season. I think he's shown that he's been a top finisher in the one-on-ones, and he's also showing that he can even finish some of the more difficult kind of half chances, quarter chances that we used to see guys like Kane, be able to finish for us when we really needed it. And also with some of the finishes that Sonny's even had in general this season, and the amount of goals that he's even scored this season, it's really hard to imagine that really like a Gift Orban or a Santiago Jimenez, as highly as I do rate them and as talented as they are, that they would really be outproducing or outperforming Son in that sort of striker's role right now. So they probably would just really end up warming the bench, at least for the time being, if Sonny continues to perform and continues to show that he's most comfortable in that striker's position. He's one of the best players on our team, so you do have to look at what sort of suits him the most in order to get the most out of him. He's shown that he also presses, I think, very well from the front, and maybe, in fact, he's actually a harder presser, or at least a better presser from the front than he is actually out wide on the left. Sometimes Sonny has been criticized for, I think, really kind of pulling out of challenges or really just not being as, effective, kind of defensively on the wing, but I actually think he's far better up front. He's really good at kind of closing down on the keeper. He seems very sort of hard working off of the ball. He just seems to kind of find it easier, I think, to be that sort of extra defender, that extra sort of defensive bit of pressure from the front than I think he actually is on the left. So that's another reason why I think you do sort of keep Sonny in whatever position has been suiting him so far this season. And while I do feel like he lacks sort of that physical presence that a lot of, fans would maybe point out, and maybe a bit of that aerial presence as well, it doesn't seem to be a big focus or a big problem for Ange's sort of system in general. He doesn't seem to be that sort of tied down to a big number 9, swinging balls into the box or anything. We kind of would rather just sort of break down teams and try to score in a variety of different ways. And Sonny, being an excellent goal scorer and also just an excellent player in general, maybe sort of suits that sort of kind of general kind of system, that general patterns of play, than really just kind of simple, get it down the line and just swing balls into the box, seeing if your striker can get ahead onto it. My other kind of point that I wanted to bring up here is I feel like we're already so flushed with forward options kind of as it is. We should actually probably look to offload maybe players this January before even bringing in really any other goal scorers. When you look at the forwards that we have right now on the books, and this is not even including Perisic, who I guess will probably just be out for the remainder of the season, but we have Bryan Hill, Kulusevski, Alejo Valise, Richarlison, Brennan Johnson, Sonny, and Solomon. That's over 7 forwards that we have to pick from, and again, that's not including Ivan Perisic either. 3 designated goal scorers I would kind of maybe identify in that sort of list there. I think Sonny obviously is one of them, Richarlison is certainly another, and then as well as Brennan Johnson. I think Brennan Johnson was probably brought in more for the goal scoring than he really was for the creativity. And if you want to bring in, let's say, another sort of big, striker, if you wanted to bring in another sort of kind of goal scorer, I think you would have to actually get rid of like Richarlison this January, because it just doesn't really seem like he has much of a purpose then anymore in this team if you were to bring in Santiago Jimenez, or if you were to bring a Gift Orban or an Ivan Toney or whoever it might be instead. Also, just quickly too, it seems like Ant seems to really like Alejo Valise. Originally, he said they didn't expect him to really be playing all that much in the first 6 months, but all of a sudden he's gotten some game time and some minutes that we didn't really expect him to get, at least originally. So it seems like Alejo Valise is making a pretty decent impression on Ange Postecoglou right now, and that's probably another reason why I would say maybe a bit unnecessary to sort of bring in another sort of striking option, because we're already kind of so flushed in that area as it is. And also, everyone was so confident that goals would sort of come from anywhere, I think, in this new system. Some even believe that Ange is less concentrated or less dependent really on like a real striker sort of number 9 type presence than really other managers that we've had, like a Conte or like a Jose Mourinho. So if you were saying at some stage, and I know plenty were, that they still sort of believe that goals are going to come from everywhere, and you still kind of, follow that line of logic, or you still sort of believe in that, I think you sort of have to stick by that. Not saying that you can't change your opinions, but nothing has really, I think, changed, actually. I think we are scoring plenty of goals. I think the goals are coming from different areas as well. So that sort of original logic, or that original belief that, Spurs aren't going to really need to be as dependent on the number 9 because of just how the system works and everything, I think is showing out to be true right now. So if you were maybe then asking for a striker this January, I don't know, in my opinion, I think that sort of like cuts between the two logics, or those kind of actually conflict with each other. But do let me know, everybody, what your thoughts are on that, because I feel like we're already so flush with forward options as it is. So right, yeah, a lot of fans did say that we'd be sort of less reliant on kind of a general number 9, or that even Ange is sort of less reliant or dependent on a number 9. And according to a lot of different stats and metrics, from sort of creativity sort of areas, from shot creating actions to key passes to touches inside the opponent's box, you can see that actually Spurs are, at least right now, probably the most creative, or at least the second most creative team in the league right now. And if the chances were coming kind of few and far between, let's say we were much further down that list, maybe kind of during the Nuno days where we really didn't have all that many chances being created, and there were games where we really just had to take whatever chance came our way, that's when I do feel like you need kind of a top number 9, or you do need like a Harry Kane, or you do need somebody that can really bury whatever chances come, because they are going to be slim. They're not going to really be producing a ton of clear-cut chances. So you need a guy that's a professional at being able to put whatever is in front of him away. But I don't think that's really any longer the case right now. It feels like we do create plenty of clear-cut chances, plenty of chances that really should be buried by almost any type of top player, that you're not really as reliant or as needing of sort of like a real ruthless number 9 goal scorer. If you're already creating so many chances as it is, that should be able to be put away by the average forward. Now, let me explain what I do feel like we actually need this January. I do feel like we need a center back and a left back. I'll explain in just a moment why we might need those two, but also I think what we might need is another central midfielder. Højbjerg potentially leaving this January, Lo Celso potentially leaving this January. Don't know which one is more likely than the other. Maybe both don't happen, but you still have to consider those for the future. So Højbjerg filling in for Basuma, sort of a backup number 6. Lo Celso filling in for Madison as sort of a backup number 10. Either of those players leave, you do probably have to replace them because they are taking up some pretty important sort of impact type roles, or just sort of kind of filling in squad type roles. I don't think Skip is really good enough to fill in for Pape Matar Sarr when he leaves for AFCON to Senegal and sort of that competition and tournament. He could be gone for a pretty long time, which means Skip could, in his favor, get a lot of, good minutes, and might prove people like me wrong. But personally, I don't think Skip really is actually good enough for this system, or for to really fill in properly for Pape Matar Sarr. I think there would be a noticeable drop off in quality. I think our midfield in general, the whole chemistry will start to kind of go a bit awry. I just feel like Skip at the moment, at least right now, in my opinion, isn't exactly good enough for this system. So we could see a huge drop off there. And that means we might need some sort of central midfielder to either fill in for a Pape Matar Sarr, to either fill in for Basuma. Of course, we have Bentancur coming back, but he's going to only take up one of those positions. He could take up the backup number 6. He could fill in as a number 8, but he can't do both. Someone's going to need to step up and be able to fill in that extra position. Could be a Skip, but I just don't have confidence in him. Now, this is something Dave and I have said a lot, right? Spurs have never struggled to score goals, at least in my lifetime. I think we've always been around sort of the top scorers around the league. We've always had good goal scorers to pick from, guys that we can rely upon. You even look at teams like Chelsea right now. We're desperate to have any sort of the forwards that we have that can be able to put the ball in the back of the net. So I feel like it's never exactly been as much of an issue as it is for other clubs for Spurs to score goals. It's actually been the opposite problem. I think Spurs over the last few seasons at least have really struggled in actually keeping goals out of their own net. Last season, we had no problem in scoring goals. We were actually, for the majority of the season, sitting around 3rd or 4th under Antonio Conte for the most goals scored, but we were actually near the bottom of the table for some of the most goals conceded. So if Romero, Vicario, Van de Ven, and Udogie, all players that really have made up this new back line and have rejuvenated this new back line, that have given us this confidence to, see out games and hold on to leads, that could end up sort of being hurt, or that could end up being tainted, or at least damaged by players like Eric Dyer coming back into the team, players like potentially Ben Davies coming back into the team, because I think they were some of the main culprits behind a lot of the goals that we did concede last season. I think there would be just far too much of a drop-off in quality if Van de Ven were to, miss a few games, or if Romero were to miss a few games. It's likely that Eric Dyer might come back into the team. Or in the case of Udogie, if he were to miss a game, we know Ben Davies is sort of the designated backup left back right now that would come back into the team. And I don't think he is good enough in possession or good enough defensively to really fill in for Udogie. And I'm not saying these guys need to be nearly as good, as the starting player. Dyer doesn't need to be as good as Van de Ven. He doesn't need to be as good as Romero, but he can't be so bad that we see such a drop off in quality that teams start targeting us, teams start taking advantage of this injury. I think what we need is somebody who's at least good enough that we're not too worried for too long in case, there's an injury or something like that. We can have confidence that the guy can step in and can do at least a job for a few games or a few weeks in order for, us to be able to continue a push or keep challenging. And of course, guys like Udogie, Romero, and Van de Ven, they're not going to be able to. I'd be surprised if they were be able to play every game this season. So eventually there will come a time when an Eric Dyer is coming back into the team, when a Ben Davies is coming back into the team, and that could end up costing us. That could end up costing us points, because last season we saw plenty of times where Spurs were under pressure and they couldn't hold out for the 90 minutes. They would end up conceding. They would end up costing points. They just couldn't keep it together. Or even, too, when we were actually ahead in games, or when we were kind of in control, or even not under that much pressure at all. I can definitely point out a few times last seasons and in other seasons where Dyer, Lloris, Davies have given up unnecessary goals under really no pressure at all. Look at last season when Dyer gave that flick on to Mo Salah when he was under no pressure, and we were actually in control of that game at one stage. Also, too, last season, I think with Lloris and North London Derby, gave away a few pretty easy goals to them that sort of gave them the momentum. You look at also even the Newcastle game where he just took out Callum Wilson kind of for no reason at all. And these sort of moments, I feel like, from last season were things that we're not seeing kind of as much this season. I don't really expect us to see that much this season, because these guys are far more reliable, far more dependable than what we had last season in that back line. But they might end up missing a game or two, and then the guys, the usual suspects, the usual culprits from last season will step into the team, and I just think they will start to commit some of the same mistakes, start to commit some of the same errors that they did last season, and it will eventually start costing us points. So that's why I feel like we need to look at maybe players that can fill in for Udogie, guys that can fill in for, a Romero or a Van de Ven, that obviously aren't going to be nearly as good or nearly as proven as those guys, but won't be nearly as big of a drop-off in quality as it would be with like a Ben Davies or like it would be with an Eric Dyer. So here's kind of my conclusion on what we actually need this January to keep that title push, or at least that sort of top places around the Premier League push sustained. In order to keep this challenge at the top sustained, we must keep investing in that defense. Spurs do not need more goal scorers, in my opinion. What we need and have needed over the past few years are fewer goals conceded. So let's keep investing in that area until we are confident in all of the options that we have in that back line. I think we're very confident in the starting back line, but let's get more confident in the players that could end up filling in for them for a suspension, an injury, whatever it might end up being. There will be guys that are going to have to step up and fill in, and right now I'm not confident in the ones that we do have. So let's keep investing in that back line, and I think that's how we sustain a title push, or at least a push around the top places of the Premier League. And everyone, if you can for me, smash that like button, please. Keep getting your comments in down below what you think we might need this January, and I will be seeing ya. Come on, you Spurs. In the Big Ange we trust. We never stop. See you, everybody.